What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at Solasta, Crown of the Magisters. Now, the interesting thing about this game is that it acquired a license to use Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition Ruleset. The environment, the story, the world is entirely unique to the developer, Tactical Adventures. But what they did is they licensed the rule set from Dungeons & Dragons. So the combat, the character creation, and all that stuff, it'll be very familiar to you. Some of those things have been changed to accommodate for the world that they're placed in, but by and large, it's a copy-paste of Dungeons & Dragons rule set, which is an interesting thing to do. So Solasta is an early access title on Steam. You can pick it up for about $30, which I did earlier. This being a checkout video, I'm just kind of gonna give you a general idea of the game and how it looks and how it feels. So character creation is very Dungeons & Dragons inspired. Like I said, it is not entirely the same because there are differences to make it fit for like the world. So if you're a paladin, for instance, you're not going to be, a paladin of like this or god from Dungeons & Dragons. You're going to be like picking an order for the world of Solasta, right? So little things like that, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. I don't know if all the options we see here are final, but I will say that I love the UI, and the tutorials that walk you through exactly what decisions you are making are very helpful, and I think other games that are based around Dungeons & Dragons could honestly take some cues from that, because these tutorials I think will help new players a great deal. So moving on from there, the story of the game isn't particularly inspired in my opinion. Basically, you're a group of adventurers that are entirely custom. Early access has some pre-mades so you can jump right into the action, but all of the characters are custom characters. There are no characters with a story or anything that is specific to them. It's just characters that you make, and the premise is that you are going to work for a council of sorts of 6 nations, well 5 nations and a scavengers guild, if you will. Basically, this council of nations needs help exploring this part of the world known as the Badlands. The Badlands are basically a wild wasteland that they need to get under control, and they're having a lot of trouble doing so because the place is a wasteland overrun with beasts. The story follows you investigating a recent disturbance at a keep, at which point some other stuff happens. You find a crown. I assume the Crown of the Magister is part of the title. And basically then you go off to find some other parts of the crown. And that's all I'll say for the story. I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but basically that's the gist of it. However, I want to give that a big caveat because when I say there's a story, yes there is, but I will say probably 80% of the game so far has been just straight up combat, which I guess is Tactical Adventure really wanting to get the most out of their license of the rule set for Dungeons & Dragons, which I suppose makes sense. So I will say how much you get out of this game and how much you like that is probably going to be how much you enjoy Dungeons & Dragons combat. The 5th edition rule set, it is very true to that. Like there's a whole grid that overlays everything and everything. It's very Dungeons & Dragons, like to a T. They didn't make a lot of caveats even for the sake of the video game. So for sure, that's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but if you're into that, you'll probably enjoy this game. But again, tons of combat, very combat heavy. About 5 hours in is when I started seeing some genuine choices to be made as far as RPGs go, like how to approach problems. Before that, it was a pretty straightforward path. I didn't really see much deviation, so I don't know how much that's going to change as early access progresses. And then I suppose the last thing I want to mention for this checkout video is the 5 nations. Now, early access doesn't give you access to everything because some of these nations imply that they could do certain things for you, and there's a reputation system where you can do side quests for these people that will give you reputation, but a lot of that doesn't seem to be in place, so it's hard for me to give much of an opinion about it, because at least as it stands, a lot of times you'll be talking to someone and it'll be like, system not in place for early access up on the screen. So basically, I'm pretty sure that system isn't done or even implemented all that well at the moment. And probably the last thing I want to mention is that when you are talking to someone, it does this in-game cutscene thing where it goes from an isometric view to an up-close view of their faces. And at least as it stands, I don't care for it. you can just tell that they didn't have a lot of resources to put in. A lot of the faces look weird, even on the max settings, and you can tell it's just where they're in game and they're zooming in on what is typically an isometric view. So it's just a little off. So hopefully that'll get fixed for early access. But I don't know. I don't know enough about game dev to tell you how much that is. It bothered me, so I wanted to mention, I suppose. Overall, Solasta is, to me, probably best summed up by saying it is a Dungeons and Dragons adventure book. Dungeons and Dragons, you can buy these adventures, like the most recent one being like Rime of the Frost Maiden or something like that, and Lost Mines of Phandelver was another recent one. And basically, it'll guide you through an adventure. And that's what Solasta reminds me of the most. It's guiding you through an adventure like that. And it's very much so that kind of setting. So the Dungeons and Dragons fans who are kind of used to that in a tabletop world, I think what they were trying to do is taking that exact thing and migrating it to a video game with as few concessions as possible. So where a lot of games will be like changing things and tweaking them to make them fit a video game better, I think Solasta, judging by what I've seen, wanted to do the opposite. They wanted to take the tabletop and stay as true to it as possible and bring that adventure format into a video game. And I think it works pretty well. It's fun. I've enjoyed the few hours I've spent with it. Here you go, guys. Check out video. If you're interested, you can pick it up on Steam. Again, it is an early access title, so remember there's going to be bugs and stuff. There you go. Thank you so much for watching. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.